Okay, I'm gonna have to get used to this new menu if I'm ever gonna replay this game again, but Jesus Christ, they've changed a bit. Hey guys, Joe here, welcome back to Enlisted. It's been a while, I know, but in this video, I'm actually gonna look at pretty much what I think are the worst perks for each of the categories. So I'm gonna be looking at one for green, one for red, one for yellow. I'm gonna look at what I think is the worst tank perk, which is going to be like a mutual one, so it's going to be like the worst one out of all three of these categories, since there's not really many. And I'm also going to look at the same with the planes. Now, I do know there are some like unique perks given to flamethrowers and given to engineers. So, like for example, there's a one for engineers here, the building speed perk, or the resources perk here for engineers. There's also another one for flamethrowers, which gives them more fuel. I'm not going to be including these perks as, really, I don't really think that I think they're good, so they're not even going to be anywhere near the worst. So, yeah, let's just start with we're going to start with the greens, then we go on to the reds, then we'll go on to the yellows, then we'll do tanks, then we'll do the planes. For the worst green perk, this one's actually quite difficult because, honestly, all of these green perks are actually pretty good. In fact, I would argue that you could pretty much use all of these green perks to an extent with every soldier. I mean, yeah, there are some. Pretty much the go-to will be sprint speed or either weapon aim speed and medpack use speed at the same time. So either these two or this one here, because those three just are really good. So, which one's the worst? My first thought was to go for the climbing speed, but that actually can be quite useful. Another one was the movement speed while crawling in crouch, but again, that could be quite useful. Speed of change in pose is actually pretty strong as well, despite it being only as, costing nothing. So I'm going to go with the jump height, which I think is probably the least. Out of all of them, it's definitely the weakest of all of these. But I'm not saying it's a bad perk. In fact, I would argue it's a decent perk. It's just that every other perk here is really good and has good uses. This is probably the least. This is probably without question the weakest of all of the perks. I'm surprised it's recommended. They need to have it so you can change your recommended, because I would have it so it would be these two, vitality, and then obviously horizontal. But yeah. Jump height, really the only thing is that you can jump over barbed wire without taking any damage. And that's the only real benefit with jump height. Other than that, it's just meh, really. And yeah, it's just a meh perk. For the red perks, I'm going to go with health restored by medpack. And really, the main problem is its cost. 8 for this, really, and it doesn't really do much. Like, pretty much, to put it bluntly, you will not realise how much health this is restoring. Like, put it blunt, also, it's quite useless if you're using Assault to Freeze. Assault to Freeze have a 100% health restored by medpack, and that pretty much heals them to full. So, if you're using Assault to Freeze, it's useless. If you're using other Assault or any other class, you might be like, you could see the use. You won't. Enemies still one-shot you regardless. Like, bolt actions will still one-shot you. You'll still take, shitloads of damage. And also, it's 8 points. If you do this, you'll be locking out vitality. You'll be locking out, that's about it really. You'll be locking out vitality, which, on its own, locking out vitality is awful. I would also say aim stability receiving damage, but honestly, that's not too bad. I would say this one isn't as bad as, losing. I think if this one was 8 and if this was less, I could see it and I'd probably have put either aim stability or stamina. But I think its cost and also the fact that it locked out vitality and the fact that it's really not that good is what cements it as the worst perk for red. Honestly, I'm seeing a theme here, as the worst perk for yellow has to go to this perk here, which is pretty much what most people would do. Is they would do this perk, this perk, and then the medpack usage speed. Now, medpack usage speed is actually really good, and in my opinion, it's one of the best perks in the game. But again, you're missing out so much when you use this. If you use this perk, you're missing out on the vertical recoil reduction and the firing speed reduction, the firing speed increase with bolt actions, which are two of the best perks in the game. Especially if you're using bolt actions, if you're using anything other than bolt actions. You're also going to be possibly missing out on firearm reload speed, which again, 12% firearm reload speed, that will save you in a pinch. That's, you know, for some weapons, that's could cut out a second of your reload time, and if you've played this game, you'll know, even 1 second is enough to you know, save you in certain situations. So, what does this give you for 10 yellow points? You basically have a greater chance to get downed upon taking damage, and you get a 50% downed state time. Okay, so basically you go from having 15 seconds to about 21 seconds. And yeah, that's not that good. On top of that, you know, you got a great chance of getting downed. You pretty much get downed at least 80% of the time. So, really, what's the point of having a better chance of getting downed, in my opinion? That's the main problem with this. It's like, what's the point? For tanker perks, it's actually quite weird, because really the problem is that all of these can be used in different situations. Now, obviously, vehicle repair is really good for pretty much everything. The driver perks are really good for drivers or anyone who can jump into drivers, so usually the commander or the machine gunner. Loader obviously has this perk here. And in terms of, you know, obviously you've got the loader perk here as well. And you also have a gunner perk. But really, which ones are pretty bad? Now, most people will probably go for one of the driving perks, but I think they're all pretty solid. And you can use them all at the same time if you have a good driver. The perk I'm actually going for is actually one of the yellow perks, and that is plus 100% usage to the repair kit. Now, this is just really there because it's taken up a slot. Now, obviously, tankers, as you can see, have a lot of yellow points, and they have a lot of green points as well. So, having something like this isn't too awful. I mean, I've got it on this guy here. It's not an awful perk to have, but the problem I have with it is you can just use a backpack, and you'll get tools. You'll get more tools on. You know, you'll get another toolkit on you. So it's not the worst perk in the game. In fact, it's generally, I would say, this is another one which you're picking at straws. Kind of like the green perk, I am picking at straws here, but when you compare it to the other perks, like, you know, module durability after repair, tank, tank gun reload speed, which is very good, especially on tanks with slow reload speeds like the IS-2, improved targeting skills, loader ammo types, which is pretty much a must-have. Some of these are must-have perks on your tankers. Yeah, you can see why it's definitely the worst. And finally, for the pilots, honestly, this one was a no-brainer. As soon as I opened this, I was like, okay, I'm going to choose this. You know, my initial one was to go for this one, but then I realised, this is already for other vehicle squads. So it can't be that one. I was immediately thinking this one, but then I realised, holy shit, this one is awful. Now, out of all of the perks here, in my opinion, this is definitely the worst of these perks. You can see how, obviously, of course, there's a lot, you know, pilots have really only got 3 major perks, you know, the overload perk, the detection radius perk, and the head swinging perk. And I think those 3 perks are probably the go-to. These are the best perks. Maybe the focus and perpetual vision perk as well is pretty good. But this perk, you know, 60% less damage when hard landing. Hard landing, if you're airballing out as a power, I mean, the only way I can see this being useful is if you're using a 188 and you're airdropping basically an entire detachment onto your enemies. But even then, like, just use medpack use speed. Just grab medpack use speed, you know, or just use any other perk. Like, Vitality would be probably better than this. I mean, pretty much any perk better than this. And also, it's a perk that pretty much will accommodate a situation which I don't think many players want to be in, which is hard landing with parachutes. I say that because really, who parachutes out of planes nowadays? Not many people do that. And the people who do that know how to use parachutes. So it basically is, it's kind of like a crutch. It is a crutch perk, but it's a really bad one. And general speaking, you know, if you look at some of the stuff like flight stamina, yeah, this one's pretty bad as well, but at least you can see why people would use it. Anyways, that'll be the end of this video. No, there was really not many bad perks in this game. It's just that I think the problem is that most people just go for the classic, weapon aim speed, medpack use speed, or sprint speed, vitality, vertical recoil, and then whatever, probably shot spread speed, that's usually my go-to. You know, most people just go for those perks rather than, other perks, but yeah. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video.